as a refresher, we could go long on every team, but because this becomes dated anyway, like free agency news cycle changed everything. We're aiming for less than 10 minutes on every single team. Doesn't mean we're going to get to everything, but the general elements of their free agency and offseason is what we're looking to tackle. Grant and I did our biggest question for essentially each of these teams. There were a few teams that we didn't cover. I think it was during a playoff elimination point. So you can go back and check those pods. But if you're wondering why we didn't spend 80 minutes on your team, it's because we have 10 or less, just for anyone who's wondering. And with that said, we're beginning with the Pacific Division. If you didn't read the podcast title, with respect to listening for this without seeing what the title is, that's true commitment. And alphabetical sounds right, or did you want to go in some sort of win-loss order? I feel like alphabetical, it's risky for us.
Right.
But isn't that part of like the danger that we might jump from Golden State to Sacramento as part of the charm of this podcast?
I think it's important to take risks. And I think for us, proceeding alphabetically is definitely, it's a gamble, but you got to stretch a little bit, you have to face your fears. So I think we should go alphabetically, with the caveat that like, we probably will get it wrong at some point.
So we'll begin with the Warriors. And the last housekeeping note is I'll begin each of these teams with just a quick run through of key free agents and what their best spending tool will be. And with that, Grant, we're about to be on the clock. Are you ready?
I'm nervous, but I'm ready.
The Golden State Warriors, the NBA champion Golden State Warriors, no less, which is why Grant is just euphoric right now. He's in a muscle t-shirt. He's really feeling himself after that Warriors championship. Key free agents, Gary Payton II, Kevon Looney, Nemanja Bjelica, Otto Porter Jr., Juan Toscano Anderson. You can throw Damian Lee under there if you would like as well. Jordan Poole is also extension eligible, as is Draymond Green, but Jordan Poole just being on his rookie contract, those are the extensions we care about the most. Their best spending tool, it will be the mid-level exception if they want to use it. So, Grant, what are you watching for from the Golden State Warriors in free agency?
Well, so I think Andrew Wiggins is extension eligible too.
He is. Excuse me, I apologize.
So he and Poole are on the hunt for the bag, as they said, like 20 minutes after they won the title, which is kind of concerning as a Warriors fan. But they've earned it. You win a title, you can ask for whatever you want. I think my main issue is, and this is where the team is headed, I think in an ideal world, is how many of the guys that are free agents are they going to bring back? And I think ideally, like all of them would be the answer, because, especially with respect to Porter, Payton, and Looney, those guys are, key players at key spots that mean a lot to the team. And, instead of being concerned with like, it's not realistic to upgrade those because those guys just, they contributed to a championship. The idea for them is that the organic growth of the young guys kind of offsets, maybe you don't get the same level of production from those three guys. You want them back anyway, so you're not going out looking for major upgrades. I think it'll be difficult to keep all of their free agents. I mean, even down to like Bjelica would be nice to have back because he had his moments and he has specific skills that are hard to find. And he made the minimum. So a lot of these guys are going to be in line for raises. It's going to be difficult to bring some of them back without getting up to like 400 million in payroll plus tax penalties. So it's just, for this team, it's a question of like, what's your threshold for spending? And do you think you can do any better than just bringing the band back, and I'm skeptical that they can. So that's kind of my macro, overlook of this team.
Yeah. If they want another checkbook win, they're going to need to bring back the band, like you say. And look, if they don't care about the money, which we know that they invariably will, Joe Lacob can say whatever he wants. Every team governor has a threshold on what they're willing to spend. Gary Payton II, something I didn't realize until Daniel LaRue pointed out, I forgot they signed him last season. So they have early bird rights, which means that they can pay him basically more than the non-taxpayers mid-level exception is what that's going to amount to. So you can keep, I would guess, Gary Payton II if you want to. You can obviously definitely keep Kevon Looney. You have his full bird rights. So like those are two guys that if you want back, they'll be back. And that will be where the criticism sort of lies, insofar as if there's any, were they willing to pay to bring these guys back? Otto Porter Jr. is more difficult. They can only go as high as the mid-level exception. So like 6.3, 6.4. I don't know if he gets more than that. I think in a wing-starved market, I could see a 1 or 2 year deal from another team in which he would get a multi-year deal where he does get the full non-taxpayer. I'm wondering to you though is, and I think this is part of the calculus. What do you expect if you had to guess in terms of extensions and who they're going to bring back? What happens this offseason? Then how does that impact what they actually need on the free agent? There's like, that's a bad way to phrase the question. There's so many moving parts here where it's, if you want them to get another big, are you assuming that Kevon Looney's leaving or that James Wiseman's going to be a net zero next year? And if you're not getting Otto Porter Jr. back, is this something you go outside the organization to try and find another cheap combo forward wing, whatever he is, or are you banking on Kuminga and Moody? If you don't extend Wiggins, what does that say? Like, do you need to then just put a contingency wing in place because he's your most important wing defender who could technically leave the following summer? So what are your sort of, if I had to, starting with like their core free agents, GP2, Otto Porter Jr., Kevon Looney, Bjelica, JTA, who among those do you expect to be back?
I think Peyton and Looney specifically, because I think he's so beloved and has been there for his whole career and just had this, like, for him, sort like a kind of, it sounds so stupid, but like kind of like a magical playoff run for him, because he's just like, he just wasn't, thought of as like a key figure. He was like a stopgap center, a ceremonial starter. Draymond would finish every game. Draymond would play at the 5 in all the minutes that mattered. And that just wasn't true. Looney like sincerely won them playoff games. And so I think combine all that, he's the most likely to be back. And factoring into that, non-stretch centers just aren't going to get paid that much. Looney is a switchable center though, still, which is,
yeah, for sure.
I think there are a lot of teams that could use what he does. Peyton, I think, is also fairly likely to be back. He's super hard to replace. He's such a weird player. I think a lot of teams would kind of struggle to fit him in as well as the Warriors do. Porter, I could see Porter just because he fits anywhere at the wing position. He can shoot it. I could see him getting, an offer that the Warriors kind of look at and say, I think maybe Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga are going to play enough quality minutes or better minutes to offset losing Porter. So totally agree. The moving parts, the theoretical improvement of the young guys makes it difficult to understand, to know sort of, how high a priority do the Warriors put on retaining any of these guys? Because you're invested in James Wiseman still, like, sorry, but you are. So you really going to spend, let's say $8-9 million on Kevon Looney, which is going to cost you like 4x, 5x with the tax penalties, and have Wiseman be like your third center on the depth chart, depending on how you still feel about Draymond. So I do think, just to summarize, Peyton and Looney, I think, are the highest priorities and the most likely to be back of all those guys you mentioned. And Porter may go. But ultimately, I think they're pretty confident that they can, if they lose those guys, they're going to backfill with the young guys playing more and playing better and just finding minimums elsewhere.
Yeah, which is why I don't think center, because I expect Looney to be back. And so that feels wrapped up. Like if you can't get Bjelica back at the minimum, it'll be someone else. And so I think that they need to focus more on perimeter players. Do you have any free agent targets that you were looking to see them go after?
Well, for sort of the Porter replacement, we're talking minimums, I think, just generally speaking. I don't know that it's a lock that they'll use the mid-level just because of what it's going to cost, with tax and everything. Like your Wes Matthews, Abdel Nader, Tony Snell. Like I think, TJ Warren is someone that would definitely not be available for the minimum, but if you could, I don't know if the cards fell in a favorable way and he was available for the taxpayer mid-level, obviously, like that's a risk you might want to take. Given his basically 2 years off, I think the Warriors can afford to do that. With the guard stuff, if you lose Peyton, you just need to find the lockdown defensive guard, I think, because that's a sort of an integral piece for this roster. And you're, again, kind of scraping. Like Chris Dunn, I think, is someone you want to look at. Howell Neto, underrated defender, can be your like third guard. Michael Carter-Williams has not played for a year, but someone like that can just go out there and defend, because that's really all they asked Peyton to do. He just happened to be a great cutter and made some corner threes, but things like that. I think you really are looking at guys that just have real niche skills that you want to fit in there.
Yeah, I guess I think GP2, maybe he's not the most likely to return. I think he's their most important free agent, even more so than Kevon Looney. The names I have for them, I don't know that all these would be minimum names. Derrick Jones Jr., would be interesting here. I don't know what his market is. Torian Prince, I think, would have to be like a mini MLE guy, or at least like part of it. I don't know what the Wolves are willing to pay him, but I think he'd be great for the Warriors, looking at how he can hit threes and just like a body defensively, not a great defender. And then the other one, my final one was Utah Watanabe, who's just like sort of a do-it-all wing, big wing that hasn't played a ton. And probably a little bit slower at certain points than the Warriors might like from their wings. But I don't know if Toronto's going to give him more than the minimum when he wasn't part of their rotation. Raul Neto was a good name, though, if you're going to lose GP2. That feels like someone who might be available within the Warriors' price range. I mostly don't expect a very eventful offseason from this team. They don't even have contracts to trade, and there's no urgency to make win now like moves because they just won. Like they are winning now.
Right.
Very quickly, among the two most important extension eligible candidates, you can loop Draymond Green into here, but do you foresee an extension for Jordan Poole or Andrew Wiggins, or who do you think is most likely to sign one?
I think Poole is most like. I don't think they're going to talk about an extension for Green at all. I mean, it'll be a short
I
conversation.
mean, Clutch might, but I don't know
Clutch is
that.
going to talk. There's not going to be a lot of reciprocation on that. I think Poole is the one you probably will be most likely to see, and like it's kind of scary to imagine $100 million extension for him because like he's an extreme one-way player, and not to say he can't get better, but you just sort of have to do that because I think he's just the potential for him to be an even better offensive player is very realistic, and I think you can find defenders at other positions, and you can get away with a small guard being a bad defender. Curry was that early in his career, and has improved. Not to like, it's unfair to compare anyone to Curry growth trajectory wise, but it's doable. Wiggins, I think, I don't know what I'd put the Wiggins extension odds at. Below Poole, above Green, but I'd say it's probably like less than 50% that they extend Wiggins. Just they want to preserve that salary slot. I think that's important, but they don't need to extend him necessarily to do that because they'll be able to retain him, using bird rights going forward if he gets to free agency.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think it's probably more likely than not they extend Poole just because what he provides or his peak is harder to replace than what Andrew Wiggins is doing. And I think the Warriors very much believe that they could just plug and play wings in, Andrew Wiggins being like a prime example of that. We were less than a minute over our time limit on the Warriors. Congratulations to us. That brings us to the Los Angeles Clippers. Key free agents for them. They've already extended Robert Covington, so he's off the board. Nicholas Batum, they have early bird rights on him. Amir Coffey is a restricted free agent. They have full bird rights on him. And probably the most underrated free agent, or definitely the most underrated free agent big, Isaiah Hartenstein. He is a non-bird free agent and was spectacular for them. Their best spending tool, if they want to use it, is going to be the mini MLE. However, they also have two sizable traded player exceptions if they want to use them. There's the one that they got from the Rondo deal. That's a $8.25 million. It expires on July 18th, so they would need to use it this summer. And then there's the Serge Ibaka one at $9.3 million that will expire around the trade deadline of next season. What are you expecting from them in free agency? Any like thoughts? Well, do you even think that because of the TPEs that they just might end up being a little bit more aggressive than a team in their tax situation normally would be?
Yeah, I think they really strike me as much more of a trade kind of in terms of like what sorts of transactions are they going to utilize to improve the roster, which is in theory super good if you get all the big guns back and everybody's set to go. I mean they're a legit contender to me that I think they just need. I think Reggie Jackson's solid. Terrence Mann, not really a pure point guard. I think they need an upgrade in sort of the playmaking department, especially if you're banking on Kawhi Leonard missing X number of games. Just price that in. You're going to need someone else, I think, to supplement Paul George. So I look at guards, playmakers, whatever position, but specifically point guard types that as their free agent targets. I think, again, going back to the sort of the avenues to improve, I think are really trades. Like they're among the few realistic Kyrie Irving trade destinations just because they have several salaries that they can throw together of quality rotation guys like Kennard, Jackson, I'd throw him in there too, Norm Powell, Marcus Morris. Like they have ways to cobble salary together for not necessarily Irving, but sort of whatever bigger name might shake loose. But free agency, I don't really expect to be a major sort of avenue for improvement for them. I don't know if you feel differently.
No, I'm with you. Maybe they go. I know they like to play small, but maybe they go out and get another big, just because I would assume that Hartenstein leaves, and you still have to fill the minutes behind Zubats if you don't want to go small all the time. And you could find a quality big, not probably not one that's going to be as good as Hartenstein, who I think might get the non-taxpayers mid-level, by the way. But you can at least maybe fill those minutes and then just commit to playing small. I would also agree that in addition to the TPEs, like they're the rare team with an excess of wings, and I feel like they could view Marcus Morris Sr. as sort of the odd man out. If you're bringing back Covington, you brought back Covington already. Kawhi and Paul George, you're hoping they're healthy. Even if you bring back Amir Coffey, who I think he's one of the more underrated free agents as well, can you use Marcus Morris Sr. to get different guard help? I proposed, and Clippers fans didn't hate it. He's not going to give you a ton of passing or rim pressure, but Jordan Clarkson for Marcus Morris Sr. Cut your tax bill. Jordan Clarkson is a player option that he probably declines next year, I would guess, at this point. Could be more flexible there. The other thing I wanted to throw at you, and I think we're pretty much in the realm of trade targets here, because I just don't know, if you want to try and sign like would Rubio go to you, and you're just fine not having him until the middle of next year. I think even names like DeLon Wright probably will cost more than the mini MLE. Tyus Jones is definitely getting more than that. I consider Dennis Schroeder for them, looking at that. I just don't know if you're going to go that route. Like, I would prefer more of a game manager than someone who's just going to give you scoring juice. And that's what also makes their situation tough. This is a name that's been thrown out. And this team, my guess is they want to duck the tax based off what they've done. And I'm not saying they would do this, but Monte Morris does fit into that Serge Ibaka trade exception. I don't know if, while the Clippers can trade a first round pick in 2028, like, could the Nuggets sell them on, like, if they protect the hell out of that pick or something and go after Monte Morris? The only reason I'm considering it is because Denver seems like they really want to cut costs in advance of having all these mega deals for the foreseeable future on their books and sort of mitigating their risk against that MPJ deal. I wouldn't do it if I want to make that 100% clear. The Clippers, though, based off how they acted at a trade deadline when they weren't like a contender because they weren't healthy enough to be one, they don't seem like afraid to spend in that regard. And so that's why the TPEs could be really valuable. And even just like, the Knicks are hell bent on sort of fucking up their future again, because it's the Knicks, and life, death, the Knicks fucking up their future. Like, I guess they don't have players the Clippers would necessarily be interested in that way. Derrick Rose doesn't fit into a trade exception. Nerlens Noel does, but that doesn't really help. Alex Burks is just outside of that range. So that might have actually been a bad example. But there are going to be teams that you have to imagine are going to be looking to dump certain contracts. And like, those trade exceptions are big enough for the Clippers to actually maybe get someone who would be a part of their every night rotation.
Yeah, I mean, Morris would be, just as good as you could possibly do. I think for what they need, for the money, for the options they have. Because otherwise, yeah, I had DeLon Wright listed as someone I was thinking of, but I agree with you that he's, I don't know if your taxpayer mid-level is going to get him. Because then you're really going like the Goran Dragic level. Like, we're going to bring Rondo back, or just like, I don't love a lot of the other options. And like, this is a luxury, right? Because Reggie Jackson is fine. Like, if you have that full roster healthy last year and Reggie Jackson is your starting point guard, I think there are not a lot of teams that are looking forward to playing that, that version of the Clippers if they don't do anything. But yeah, I think I'm trying to think of other teams that might be looking to duck the tax. But yeah, I do feel like Morris is really, because look, Denver we'll get to this in the Denver section, but I think Denver believes pretty strongly that Bones Highland is, especially with Jokic as your primary ball handler, if Bones Highland is your point guard, like, you're good. And Jamal Murray's back. And so you have plenty of, playmakers, shot creators. Morris kind of becomes expendable. And I think more broadly, I think it feels to me, I've heard the opposite said, and I disagree. It feels to me like there are a lot of teams that need a point guard this offseason, and there are not a lot of quality options. So that's why, like, Malcolm Brogdon and D'Angelo Russell are just in every trade rumor, and Tyus Jones is probably getting overpaid. So Morris, I think, is a real, I don't know if you're going to get the most for him sending him to LA into a trade exception, but Morris is someone I think that could be hugely valuable for Denver, not just because he'll get him out of the tax, but just because he could bring a decent return.
Yeah, the other name I thought about for, and it would be a TPE thing, and we know that this team is going to be pinching pennies, was Cameron Payne. I don't know if they would consider him enough of an upgrade, but the previous, not this past year, but the previous season, he made strides as a playmaker, like an actual playmaker. So I could envision someone like that helping him. And like I said, in terms of the bigs, like you could shoehorn like almost anyone into here because I think they're going to play positionless. I would say like 20 to 25% of the time, if not more. Yeah. And that if it's, what does Thomas Bryant go for? Not really going to help your defense, but he's coming off an injury. Didn't play much last season after he came back from said injury. So those might be names. But this team, I think they're going to be, fireworks is probably the wrong word, but they feel like a team that's going to be more active than most teams in their situation would be.
I think they are more so than any other team are the one that's ready to tell the Warriors and their like 350 to 400 million tax bill, like, hold my beer. Like, I think the Clippers have the drive and the means to just, like, you thought the Warriors were paying a lot. Okay, let's get this Ballmer money out there and see if we can get to like 450 million in cap and tax.
So do you think they'll use their mini MLE then?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think they care less about money than any other franchise, Warriors included. I think because if you think too, like, how long is the Paul George, Kawhi Leonard window going to be open? Like it may be shut already, but I think they're going to spend as much as they possibly can to see if this year and next year maybe they have something.
They're going to be no worse than the second most popular title bet next season because the Warriors might be first, which fair. Maybe some people consider the Bucks, but I think the Clippers are going to be top two there. I thought about Thaddeus Young for them, but I don't know if then you're putting too many eggs in the positionless basket. But if you could get him for the mini MLE and Toronto didn't want him, my guess is Toronto's going to pay him more, maybe over short term. That would be interesting. But the Clippers, I'm more fascinated by them. I want to see them use at least the Rondo trade exception. But Monte Morris, when I came up with names that could fit in there on a different podcast, he wasn't on there. Then I saw kind of what the Denver Nuggets were doing, and I was like, oh, yeah. So that's where I'm at with them. Los Angeles Lakers, their vitals are they don't have any vitals, but for real, they're key free agents. You could boil it down. Malik Monk is the most important one. He's non-bird. Carmelo Anthony is also non-bird. And then Austin Reeves has a 1.6 million non-guarantee that I am going to guess if they haven't guaranteed it already, which I haven't seen per reporting, they will. So really just Monk and Anthony. I think even Anthony's more replaceable, but I felt like his season was not underappreciated, but he was not part of the issue in LA. He did exactly what they would have needed him to do. They just had no idea what the fuck they were doing overall. They do have a Marc Gasol trade exception worth 2.7 million, which I'm only noting that because they're so limited in what they could spend. Like if there's an opportunity to go out there and get a player who fits into that, you should in theory use it, but the Lakers are a poor ass franchise that might not. Their best spending tool overall is that mid-level exception. And the question looming over all of this, it doesn't need to be the first on point, is will they trade Russell Westbrook, or would you include a first round pick or two to do so? Is there even a scenario in which you attach to first him and get someone back? But what are you really looking at? And they need almost everything. I think they could use supplementary ball handling still. I think their biggest needs are just complementary defense and shooters, because that's how you're supposed to build a team around LeBron and AD, contrary to what the Lakers did this last offseason.
Yeah, I mean, like, my overarching thought is that, and this will never happen because I think, most of that front office is probably tied to the length of LeBron James' tenure and Anthony Davis. But I'm trading both of those guys. I'm blowing the whole thing up. This is beyond the scope of a free agent, look ahead. But like, if you hit home runs on let's say you sign guys that are, you do as well as say the Warriors did with your minimums, right? Mm-hmm. You find Peyton, Porter, Bjelica, you got three, you hit three bombs with your minimum guys, and these are rotation players now. Like, that's still not, you still have one of the worst rosters after your top two players in the league. So I would try to trade well, but so if we're not going to blow it up, So I guess, yes, you've got to throw your first round pick in there with THT and none, and try to move Westbrook for whatever. Like, I guess, but realistically, he's going to be on this roster because there's no positive value trade from another team's perspective. I don't think that would take him on. So you have to absolutely nail the mini mid level signing, which I think they'll use it. Like, you just sort of have to. It's, even though, as you said, they're not one of the big spendy franchises, despite being in LA, they're like a family operation. There's no Microsoft money behind the Lakers.
And by the way, you need to get away from that, where the teams can no longer be like, that's their sole source of income, basically, because then you have situations where the Lakers are applying for a government-backed small business.
Got to get that PPP. Yeah, forget the mom and pop hardware store around the corner. The Lakers need help. I don't know, like they need everything. So like, where do you even start? So what I was looking at for just say the mini mid level, like Bryn Forbes, because you just need someone that's going to make shots and run around. Like, I mean, how bleak is that? If you want to on minimums, I like someone like Joe Ingles, where you might get like a couple months at the end of the season out of him, and then he's able to make shots and distribute a little bit in the playoffs if you make it. That's the other thing. You can't just necessarily operate like, we got to be ready for April and May, so we'll take some risks on like Rubio or Ingles or whoever else is not going to be a full season player, because you just won't make it in the West. So they're over a barrel. Like, what are you going to go? Damian Lee would like start for them. Can you get him for the minimum? PJ Dozier is another like injured guy that maybe you throw him out there and he can be like a seventh guy. I don't know. I would love to hear if you have better suggestions than I do, because mine all suck.
I approach it like this: is who do I think the best free agent they could realistically sign was, or level of free agent they could realistically sign? Malik Monk is actually probably their ceiling. Non-Bird, though, I don't think they're going to use their mini mid level to keep him. And so if he's back, I'm calling shenanigans like with Nick Batum and the Clippers, to where there was that wink, wink. Oh, we'll pay you when you have your early bird rights. But aside from Monk, I think you're looking at a Gary Harris or a Taurean Prince or an Otto Porter Jr. Like, that is the ceiling of guys that I could see. If you're throwing your entire mini MLE at them, they'll take it. I think more realistically than that, you mentioned Damian Lee was a name that sprung to mind, as like those guys, they have distressed value or undefined value. Can you get minimum and they're very plug and play at both ends. Can you pay them and just slot them here? And look, some of the names that are being mentioned for the Lakers, like, they're not like realistic because of just what they could spend. You could loop TJ Warren in here if you wanted as well. Just, I don't know what his market's going to be like, but if I'm Indy, I'm willing to keep him if all he's getting is the mini MLE. So something that's related to this, though, is there have been reports that Kyrie has told the Nets he would sign for the MLE with the Lakers. And I guess if I go back and forth, because Kyrie Irving is just notoriously full of shit. Mm-hmm. So like, he's a disinformation like believer. So I wouldn't believe what he's saying. That being said, like, that is their, like, that is their saving grace. If they luck into something like that, where there's a player that really forces his way there to where maybe you could even move Russell Westbrook. I'm just, given how in the now NBA teams focus, even if you attached 2027, 2029, and then swaps in 26 and 28 to Russ, like, is there even a team that will give you a player back for him? Because yes, it's an expiring contract, but it's $47.5 million.
Yeah. I know your question's rhetorical. That's I think so. The Kyrie thing, just to touch on that, like, that's the simplest explanation is that is a pure leverage play. That's not like a novel. Like
I would be like, I dare you to. I'm not a big fan of teams calling players bluff, but Kyrie Irving is like the biggest cartoon ass person in the league. So just, I would be, yeah, go ahead. You take the mini MLE from Los Angeles. Maybe they could get, look, if they get rid of THT, none, you open scenarios where you could give him the full non-taxpayer, but like, that's 10 plus million. Kyrie's never been, even before the whole COVID stuff, eminently available. So like, if you're him, you have to want to lock down some form of long-term money. Yes. You also lost your Nike like signature shoe deal, or signature shoe, whatever it is. So that had to cost you money. And I think he lost like 15 plus million in salary last year. That has to matter even to him.
And I think, just as like a macro point, it's so appropriate that like the best way forward for the Lakers is some star just deciding against most logic that he wants to be there. Because that's like the only way that they've built anything in the post Kobe era, right? Like LeBron decided to be a Laker. That's how you get Anthony Davis. That's how you get a bunch of other guys. Like that's how they're good or were good. And so just banking on another guy doing that is so on brand and perfect. And so it really, what it does is it masks, like, in most of LeBron's tenure, the front office has just totally stepped in it. Like, just the decisions have never made sense. So like, of course their best way forward is just like, essentially someone still believes in Lakers exceptionalism and wants to be there. Like that's the reality. Like, approaching free agency in a normal fashion, just like, you're not going to get anything. That's just they don't have the assets. That's just what it is.
Yeah, and it's just like even some of the minimum, like guys who might be available for the minimum, like a Dwayne Dedman is a backup five, or I guess they would play him next to Anthony Davis, knowing how the Lakers like to roll. So I feel like it has to be an eventful summer for them. They have more than half their roster spots to fill at this point. I think they did a nice job with who they drafted at number 35. They now have Scottie Pippen Jr. and Sharif O'Neal, or whatever his name is, Shaq's son. So they're still recruiting or going after the big names in that way. But I don't know what to expect from them this offseason. If they're not willing to include a first round pick in a rush trade, though, my response is Russell Westbrook will be a Laker next season.
Yeah, I think that's the most likely outcome.
I'm with you.
It would have happened by now if it was going to happen.
Is Kyrie wearing a Lakers jersey next season? Yes or no? No justification, just yes or no.
No.
That feels like a good time to move on to the Phoenix Suns, who are just like, their off seasons all of a sudden become like uncomfortably eventful to where you didn't want it to be. But their key free agents, obviously DeAndre Ayton, restricted, Bismack Biyombo, non-bird, JaVale McGee, non-bird, and also Ish Wainwright, who is just like super intriguing as like a almost PJ Tucker type player. He is a non-bird, restricted. They also have Cameron Johnson, who's extension eligible. I'll be shocked if he gets one because Robert Sarver's super cheap, and it seems like they want to keep their options open in terms of trades. Their best spending tool, if they're going to use it, is the mini MLE. They like sneakily have a ton of holes they need to fill all of a sudden, because you need a third ball handler and creator, one who can run lineups without Chris Paul and or Devin Booker, but maybe also one who's big enough to play with them. And Cameron Payne did not check that either of those boxes as capably as he did the season before. You need to figure out what's going on with Ayton. And if you are signing and trading him, is paying JaVale McGee, who I assume you can keep because a 120% raise off $6 million should be more than enough to keep him for a season. But like, is McGee and like Bismack Biyombo, like without, like, is that adequate filler if DeAndre Ayton is leaving? And then I also feel like, I know they have Shamet and I know they have guys who can hit threes, but they need like a high volume, like 3-point shooter. They could also use some additional rim pressure. I know it's not supposed to be this huge concern, but I do think it's kind of come back to bite them now on a few different occasions. I'm still high on them if Chris Paul and Devin Booker are going to be there, but the DeAndre Ayton restricted free agency path looms over all this. And I think it ultimately is just going to determine the course of their offseason.
Yeah, I think that's obviously like item one on the list. Although, like, in terms of finances, Devin Booker being eligible for the Supermax extension now is like,
yeah, that's a good point.
It's a big deal too. But yeah,
you offer that, by the way, right? I'm not fucking around. Like, you offer Devin Booker the Supermax.
Yeah, even if you're the Suns and you are not habitually, jumping at the chance to spend, like, you can't. I mean, like, you just can't mess around. I don't think. I have like no questions about Devin Booker being in the class of player that's worth that going forward. So for Ayton, since we're doing this the day after the draft, I think like the Pistons freeing up money, but then also drafting a center that they really liked, kind of, I don't know what that does for Ayton's options in terms of the offer sheets he can get. It feels to me like, I think so if you had to guess, I think the two most likely options are sign and trade. And I think the Miles Turner for Ayton works, even with base year compensation issues. I'm fairly sure my math is right on that. Or he's going to come back at less than at a number he doesn't. That's less than that 5,177 that he's been eligible for forever. So I think if I'm the Suns, my goal is to sign Ayton to a long-term contract, and you can trade him down the road if you want to. He should theoretically be more valuable, retain his value at the very least if you've got years of team control over him. If you're an acquiring team, that's going to matter. But I don't hate the Miles Turner sign and trade, especially if Ayton is going to be the version of Ayton you're going to get. In addition to like the kind of scary, he's playing video games all night. I don't know how much stock you put in that type of thing, but in addition to that stuff, like if he's just kind of, whatever the closest thing is to a malcontent without being like outwardly like mutinous, like that would kind of suck for the Suns next year. If he's got some money, but not enough to his liking, and you're just not getting the best version of him. That's not ideal if you're trying to win like immediately. So I don't know. That's the toughest situation. I'm curious. How do you see the Ayton thing shaking out if you had to like rank the likelihood of outcomes?
I think he's most likely to leave now, and I wouldn't have said that a few weeks ago. Detroit getting Jalen Duren, I think, in the draft hurts his market. But if I had to say the most likely team that I think ends up poaching him, or there's a sign and trade framework there, I feel like it's San Antonio. And it's been very clear that he wants to go there, or his camp wants him to go there. They will have cap space. We've seen DeJounte Murray linked to trade rumors now. I don't think if you're getting DeJounte Murray in a Ayton sign and trade, you are also giving up a lot of other stuff. And let's make that clear. In addition to that, I would explore that though, because like DeJounte Murray is not that much older than DeAndre Ayton, but if the Spurs are shifting timeline, like I originally thought it would be Josh Richardson, Jakob Poeltl, the number 9 pick would be the ceiling on their offer. They could also just sign him outright if they wanted to. They could get to that number, but you're worried about the Suns have to match. If no team is going to engage and sign it, and he just signs an offer sheet, you match because you can't let him walk. I don't care if it's a max deal, you match. But I do expect that DeAndre Ayton is going to be signed and traded. If I had to pick the team, most likely it's the Spurs. The Pacers were a good one. And I do though wonder if Miles Turner, yes, he's cheaper in the interim. How much of a cheaper number are you getting him for than Ayton moving forward? Because he, from 8, it doesn't even seem like the Suns want to pay a center 20+ million, at least under their current salary structure. I don't think there'd be as big a drop off defensively as some people believe with Turner to Ayton. He's better on the perimeter than I think people give him credit for. And he is a better straight up rim protector. DeAndre Ayton's probably just like can make more complicated head on a swivel reads. The offensive drop off, I also don't know how big that would be because Ayton never truly explored the self creation. He's going to be a better offensive rebounder and has better touch around the basket. So I think his skill set is more expansive. And I know Miles Turner fancies himself like a post up artist, and when he's really not. If I'm Phoenix, I think I'd rather pay Ayton, match an offer sheet, than get just Turner. Like what else is a part of that deal? And that's not just again, the immediate drop off, I don't think would be that stark, if at all. I just really don't trust them to be like, oh, and then we're going to keep Miles Turner as long as Sarver is running that franchise anyway. Are there any other teams that spring to mind as like a potential Ayton destination to you?
I mean, so even though what I just said about the Pistons, I don't think drafting a rookie center necessarily precludes you from going after just signing Ayton to an offer sheet and seeing what happens. Cause clearly you can move Duren if you need to, it's just, there are options there. I don't think you should rule them out. But the other thing is the base year compensation stuff, if you're talking sign and trade, is really tricky. There are not a lot of guys that would make sense in terms of how the money would fit and would Phoenix actually want them. And I don't know if any of the other cap space teams, no. Short answer is there aren't a lot of teams that jump out. And that's why I think the Turner thing, again, I don't want to keep harping on it, but I think actually it's possible that because of the way Phoenix operates, the fact that they might lose Turner in free agency after a year is more of a feature than a bug, because you can save the face of hey, look, we got this guy for Ayton for a year. And maybe that's as wide as the window is going to be in Phoenix with Paul's age. And then it's yeah, we couldn't keep him. It just didn't make sense. And I don't know, there's sort of, it seems like a Phoenix thing to do potentially, is that's actually a plus, that you get someone that makes you look good in the moment. Ayton didn't want to be here. You save some face, and then, you maybe contend again, or maybe you go all the way. Who knows? Turner adds a lot. and then he's gone. So, and then you've saved the money. You didn't have to spend a maximum. I don't know. So it's hard to know with how Phoenix operates. We did kind of gloss over the other concerns you mentioned, but I actually, for the playmaking, like get to the basket stuff, I think if you have Booker and Paul, you can stagger them a little bit, and you just hope you get good campaign instead of bad campaign, and then maybe Shamet makes some shots. I just, I don't know. I actually think like Jalen Smith would kind of make a lot of sense on this team.
Oh, come
Which is
on.
like my favorite subplot. Okay, we're going to talk about Jalen Smith real quick because I was looking at the numbers. And so, like, yeah, granted, it was like 20 some odd games, like 500 minutes with Indiana last year, but he was good. He was a good player in Indiana. And it's just insane. He's played. So that 500-ish minutes is like half of his total career minutes. So for half of his career, Jalen Smith has been a good player. So he's going to come up a lot as we go through who should teams be looking at as free agent centers, because I just like, I don't understand what happened. Why did Phoenix give up so early? Why, he clearly has some skills. I don't understand. So I just want to mention that Jalen Smith should be someone they really wish they still had.
I can't bring myself to think that Jalen Smith would make a contribution on this team. He did have a good spin in Indiana, but let's be semi-realistic here.
I'm on Jalen Smith Island. This is official. The flag is planted.
I do agree with you that you don't prioritize. If you're trying to get the ball handling upgrade with what you could spend, this has to be I say ball handling, just a playmaker, shot creator upgrade. It has to be via trade, would be my guess. Are there any free agent targets that actually stand out that make sense to you for this team? I thought Thaddeus Young. I don't want to keep throwing that name around, but if they wanted to downsize, and it seems at points like they did that with Sharks a bunch before the season, since he was obviously injured, could you go that route? I don't think you could get Chris Boucher for the mini MLE, although he would be perfect for this team too. And it's also tough to understand because their needs shift a lot. If DeAndre Ayton's back, you're focusing on, if you bring back JaVale McGee, done. Your center rotation is whatever. You could, I guess, have more plug and play wings if you wanted to get involved in some of those sweepstakes. I just don't. What's weird about this team is that they'll be so good if they run it back. I don't look at the free agent targets that are realistic for them and think that's the one that they need to go after.
Right. Unless, I think PJ Tucker is going to be out of the price range. I think Otto Porter is someone they should at least look at. Boucher was on my list. I think Bjelica, if you're not sure what you're going to get from Dario Saric after the ACL, I think Bjelica replicates a lot of that. And I think, although if you're, I don't think you could justify spending an exception on Bjelica. So you'd be looking at the minimum. And if the minimum is the offer, I don't know why he takes Phoenix's over the Warriors, for example, or just any number
playing
of
time, maybe depending on if Ayton's there or not.
Yeah, sure. He could have a bigger opportunity. That's for sure. Cause he'll be depending on what Looney does, fourth on the center depth chart for the Warriors. But I think Bjelica is going to have multiple, multiple offers at the minimum, but maybe a few above that. So, it's tough. I agree. Look, they won more games than anybody last year. Chris Paul probably had COVID in the playoffs, and that was the biggest problem they had. So this isn't a team that needs a huge amount of help. I think you just hope campaign is, 2 years
better
ago campaign and you figure out the center stuff.
Just to put names on this, the three that I would like to see them get as sort of jack of all trades, could fill different holes depending on what the lineup is that night or who has it going. Either of the Martin twins. I know their games are a little bit different, but just guys who are going to be able to hold their own on defense. They shot just well enough on modest 3-point volume last year to get going. And I think that the secondary passing that both of them provide, maybe you trust Cody Martin there a little bit more than Caleb. I think Cody might actually be more gettable too, because the Hornets are cheap. And so if you're giving the mini MLE and restricted free agency, do they match? And then Amir Coffey, I sort of alluded to him before. They gave him more ball handling responsibility in LA last year than I think a lot of people realize. And he was able to work really off the dribble, do some pick and roll initiation. Those would be the names I'd probably like to see them just go after. But everything is just contingent upon what happens with Ayton, and if he's leaving, what are you getting back for him?
Just a couple others. I think, he's not a playmaker, he'll come up a lot. Daniel House, I think, is someone just you throw him out there. He's, basically was Utah's best defender down the stretch wing defender. And we haven't talked about Victor Oladipo. I don't know what he's going to get, but like if you're looking to
I was
take a
assuming
shot,
non-taxpayer. Do you think that's unreasonable for him?
I think that's probably, I don't think he's getting the full mid level, right? Like you just can't do that. So yeah, I mean, he's someone that it's an upside play. You're hoping that the further removed he is from the injury, but then that also cuts against like one of my great tenets of NBA player acquisition is you never take the guy that just sort of like looked way better in Miami because
Right,
when
right,
you leave
right.
Miami, it doesn't
Yeah,
look
so
as
rule Caleb Martin off your board too as well, right?
Oh no, yeah. If he stays in Miami, I'm all in on Caleb Martin. But if he leaves, I think he just turns back into what he used to be, which was a guy who had to sign a two-way.
Very quickly, because we're over on the Suns, is DeAndre Ayton in Phoenix to start next season? Yes or no?
I'm gonna say yes, because I think the Suns will just match and then worry about trading him at some point down the line.
You're not as spicy as Stephen A. Favale, who predicted that he's leaving. Our final team in the Pacific, the Sacramento Kings. They're key free agents. There aren't many. Jeremy Lamb, if you consider him a key free agent, and then Dante DiVincenzo, who is restricted. Trey Lyles has a team option that I would decline if I were them, but that's just, their notable extension or their most notable extension candidate, Domas Sabonis. I think the raise that they can give him is probably going to be a lot less than he thinks that he can get if he hits free agency in 2 years. I really kind of think it's, given what the Kings gave up for him, you absolutely offer it. And for him, when you're looking at, the 120% raise off of like what your salary number is, that's actually probably fair market value for him when you're looking at 25 million a year, whatever that ends up being on average. So I would take it if I were him. I think the Kings are going to offer it and he won't take it though. That's just my gut feeling. So there's that for him. And then their best spending tool is the non-taxpayer MLE. They could like have negligible cap space, but it won't even be as much. They'd have to jump through a bunch of hoops if they want to have more than that $10 million spending tool. And I think their needs, even after getting Keegan Murray, like they still just need wings and defenders, preferably wings who can shoot, because you have Sabonis and Fox now that you're running the offense through. So you want to dot them with as many spaces as possible. And then the other thing for me is, do you have a good front court partner for Sabonis? I guess you could consider it Harrison Barnes, but I think you need like additional four power there. And where's Rashawn Holmes getting traded? And for all this talk about, my guess is, I feel like mid-season, there's going to be a mid-end contract that Toronto has signed or has on its books, and they're going to be the team that gets Rashawn Holmes. It just makes too much sense on the court wise for Toronto. They don't need to go after this flashy big that costs you Gary Trent Jr. or OG Anunoby. But are there teams that could come in and swoop in and give up value for Rashawn Holmes? I was shocked he got paid as little as he did last summer, but he's a wasted asset. And I think his value declines. It declined the minute you acquired Sabonis because those two can't play together.
Well, it declined more with Keegan Murray, because I think in a perfect world, Keegan Murray is going to play some minutes at center too. I don't know. That's a big question, coming out of the draft is like, the rap on Murray is that he's a very capable on-ball defender and has some switch in him and all that stuff, but like not quite sure that he's actually a guy you can play at the 5 against a lot of lineups. But like, I don't know, the league's only getting smaller, generally speaking. I think there's a real path forward. Like it's possible that Murray is someone that spends minutes at the 5 when Sabonis is not playing. So yeah, Holmes is a total, like Holmes, I mean, Charlotte, even with Mark Williams having been drafted to play center, like Charlotte is just like a no-brainer destination. There's a million of them because Holmes is I don't know, a mid-tier to like lower third starter, I think, that has a couple like solid skills for like, backup money, basically. So yeah, I think that's a factor. Like the thing though, this team's biggest need remains just quality wings in between the Fox, Davion Mitchell, and then Murray, Sabonis bookends. And Harrison Barnes, I don't think Harrison Barnes is a wing anymore. I think Harrison Barnes is a 4. He'll be fine. Like he's a smart defender. They're just gonna have to use him on the big wing threats, and that's just how it's gonna be. But that's not optimal positioning. So like I don't know where they go. I think for sure they're going to target First of all, they're going to target every Warriors free agent there is, because that's how the Kings operate. Like they go for the coaches, they go for just everybody that comes from the Warriors. So Porter, I think, is someone to look at. Damian Lee for sure.
I actually love Otto Porter Jr. there, though. I actually very much like
Otto
that.
Porter works everywhere. Like, it just, that's the thing.
Idea of him anyway. Yeah, this
Yeah,
past season's Otto Porter for sure.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing, is Porter is not going to be as good wherever he goes as he was with the Warriors, just because they managed his minutes. They asked him to do only the things he was good at. It's the difference between being on a team with a bunch of good players and not. But yeah, Damian Lee, for sure they can look at him. He's a little smaller on the wing side, but like, I would rather play him than Mo Harkless. I would probably just as likely want to play him as Justin Holiday. And like, what else? That's it. Those are the wings. Those are the wings that they have. DiVincenzo's too small, I think, to really be like your, you go guard, whatever.
I don't know what his market is going to be. Do you think he's going to get more or less than the bigger MLE type money? They don't need to use that. I want to be clear to sign him, but 10 million a year or less.
Well, I think it's going to be less because I don't think anyone's going to offer him the full mid-level, and the Kings are going to look at that and say, like, how's 8? How's 9? I think it'll be under that. He could really return a lot of value on that if he could stay healthy and develops a little bit, but he's just, he's a third guard, and that's just kind of what he is. I don't know. I think it sucks. Like, every team needs wings, but the Kings really need wings, and there just aren't a lot that they're realistically going to be able to get beyond the ones. I don't know. Do you have some more that you like the fit there for?
Well, very quickly, I will say, if I were them, I would offer Otto Porter the bigger MLE. Maybe it's like shorter. Maybe it's the 2 years rather than 3 or 4. I would absolutely do that, though, and see if he bites, because I think he's a perfect fit there. I thought about Kyle Anderson for them, but because they could use some secondary playmaking too. When you look at you have Sabonis and Fox, but like, do you trust Davion Mitchell to be like the floor general if Fox is off the court? I guess you could trust Harrison Barnes for some self-creation. This is tangentially related to the free agency targets. I don't understand the obsession with John Collins among Kings Twitter, like where there was the talk about Barnes for Collins. I actually thought that made both teams, maybe Atlanta, like the fit made more sense, but like, Barnes isn't a great defender. And then for the Kings, Collins and Sabonis, like, yes, in theory that works, but that would be a turnstile defensively. Even like, Collins is look, I'm going to be honest. I think Miles Turner covered up for Sabonis so much. John Collins is a better defender than Domas Sabonis. That's where I'd be at with. I like that that wasn't even in doubt for you. So
not controversial at all on my
end. But like, it's weird because they have more like spending power than most teams, but I don't know if there are names out there that might be worth funneling it all into, because the wing market is so like barren this summer. And I'm wondering if for them, even though they don't have, I mean, you have Rashawn Holmes, like, can you get Kelly Oubre Jr. from Charlotte for Rashawn Holmes? Like, I know they have Mark Williams, but is their center position really set? They have Kai Jones as well. They're looking to cut money though, so maybe that wouldn't be the route that they go. It feels like if they're going to get a wing, or there would have to be like a big for wing trade involving Rashawn Holmes for them, because aside from Otto Porter, I'm trying to think of the 3-4 that I would give the bigger MLE to. I even thought a little bit about Victor Oladipo for them, but that sort of feels like if you could get him on the bigger MLE, I might just consider it for the talent upside play, but it does get a little dicey with what need did you actually fill when De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis are there already. I would have loved for them to have gotten involved in the DeAnthony Melton sweepstakes, just because he's essentially a 3-and-D wing who's sized like a guard. Maybe you bank on Davion Mitchell showing a lot of improvement with his jumper, and he did have flashes of that during his rookie year. It's just weird because if you wanted me to give you like minimum type wings, like, I think Yuta Watanabe could work for them. Damian Lee you already mentioned him, would be absolutely fine. If they're going to spend money though, like, make it be, I would go with probably Cody Martin or Amir Coffey. Like, if they're going to try and throw some of their MLE weight around, those are names that stand out. And if it sounds like we're regurgitating a lot of the same names, it's because there are so few wings out there right now.
Let's do it.
Right. And so like, that's the route I could maybe see them going. Like, and if you're going to just, I don't know how much better it makes you, but Taurean Prince, yes, in theory, offensively works with you. There's just, I don't know what wing, and I'm calling Otto Porter a wing. He's like a big for what the Kings need most. There might be like 1 or 2 names out there that are worth piling your full MLE into.
Yeah, I again, and the issue too is it's not just they need wings, like, because if you're going to play Sabonis Fox. I think Murray can shoot it. Barnes can shoot it. But I think if you're bookending a team with Sabonis and Fox, Sabonis doesn't shoot threes. Fox has had 1 year where he shot threes well, otherwise has been really bad. You can't. It's got to be wing that can shoot. So then you're even like it's even scarcer out there. So and if you're going to spend the MLE, is again to regurgitate names, is Daniel House worth the full MLE? No way. I don't think so. But he's one of the very few guys on the market that could sort of tick all those boxes. Because I think there's a case to be made that they might need to be looking at Rodney Hood or in the Hood, Nader, Snell, that kind of lower tier. The problem with when you add those types of guys that are just real on the margins contributors to a bad team, it just doesn't usually they're just not usually the best version of themselves. So it's tough. There are a lot of names, but the trying to match up what the guy's actually worth with what the Kings actually need, it's difficult to find sort of the sweet spot there.
And they almost need a true wing because you have Keegan Murray and Barnes, so you don't want to skew too much towards the 4.
Yeah.
You can't Gary Harris. I know he's small.
You can't play Porter with Murray and Barnes. That's just there's not enough foot speed there. I don't think Gary Harris is a good name for sure. I think we'll get to this in the Northwest, but if Gary Harris is on any team other than Nuggets, I'll be surprised.
I thought, well, yeah, we'll get on that, the different one, but yeah, the Kings offseason is interesting. I think for them, they're probably a little bit more fascinating on the trade market than free agency because they're not going to be, I don't think they're going to be a team where you're surprised that, they bagged that name for the bigger amount. It'd be great if Nick Batum decided he wanted to go there. It'd be really funny if they wound up spending more than the minimum on another big because they're planning on trading Holmes. And so do they get into Hartenstein sweepstakes thinking, Hartenstein he shoots floaters and he shot some threes last year that he could totally play with Sabonis. I didn't understand the transfixiation with John Collins, to be honest with you. And you're so Kings, I didn't hate their move at the draft, by the way, as much as other people. I still made fun of them for it because I don't think they deserve the benefit of the doubt. But Keegan Murray seems like he's going to be a perfect fit there. So, I did, by the way, consider Chris Boucher for this team, though, because one, I love Chris Boucher, and I'm also of the mind you need a real, if let's just say Rashawn Holmes isn't a high volume shot blocker, but he's a pretty okay rim protector. If the intention is to move him, or you can't play him with Sabonis, you need a shot blocking presence who can play alongside Sabonis, and Boucher chucks enough threes that I think it would work.
Final Kings prediction, I guess a question, the over under on Warriors free agents that the Kings have on the roster next year is 1.5.
I'm going to take the under.
Okay. I'm going to go over just so we can have something to look back on.
Grant, this was great. Thank you so much. You're able to tell our listeners before they just hear your voice again on the next podcast where they can find you and all the great work that you put out / maybe some of those infrequent tweets that you throw them as. I bet if I went to your Twitter profile right now, this is why you should follow Grant. He's not going to spam your feed. No. I bet if I went to your Twitter profile right now, your last tweet would be probably Hardwood Knocks related.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Listen, I support the brand. And yeah, you can find me on the next entry on your whatever podcast feed you use on Hardwood Knocks probably, and GT_Hughes on Twitter. If you want, for some reason you can't figure out where to find Hardwood Knocks, just check my Twitter feed because it's 90% retweeting Dan and Hardwood Knocks accounts. So, I stay loyal.
We will catch you in the next episode, everybody. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and follow all our social handles, YouTube, join our Discord. All the links are in the podcast description. And until that next time, we leave you with a shout out to the one, the only, the conference finalist, Frank Ntilikina.